What is it about the Central Divisions? I can't make sense out of them. Can the Cardinals?
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now, and I'm about to start my 6th year here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pod on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Be sure to like and subscribe and be part of the YouTube family here. If you post on any of those social media, put the hashtag Everyday Sully on there. I want to get a sense of who's listening to us every single day. Hey, before we jump headfirst into the show, I'm going to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. So that's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Before we get started here, we bring in our guest. I'm going to address first of all, the trivia question, which was, the last show we did was Kansas City Royals centric with the new host of Locked On Royals, Mr. Johnson over there. And the question was, George Brett is the all-time hits leader in St. Louis Cardinals history. Who is the only other Royal to get 2,000 hits in their career, 2,000 hits with the Royals? And a couple people, including Amos George, got it correct. The answer was Frank White. Frank White, the great second baseman for the Royals, spent his whole career there. Great player, wonderful all-star. By the way, another great player, another great, wonderful all-star is our beloved host of the Locked On Cardinals show. He's coming on board with us. It's JD Hafron. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, Sully? Good to see you again, my friend. Hope the not really time off. We haven't had a lot of that, but time between seasons, I guess. I hope it's been treating you well, buddy.
Well, this is the time I think a baseball podcast is most critical. There's no games on. They're during the regular season, if you want a baseball fix, you turn on the ball game. In the off season, we supply this here at the Locked On Podcast Network, a little chance to talk baseball even in the off season. I'm going to address something here. At the beginning of the show, I introduce myself. I tell you a little bit who I am, just a little bit of my background in case someone's brand new to the show. Say, who the heck is Sully? I have television experience. I've been podcasting for a long time. And I just throw that out there just as a little, in case you're new to the, getting your boat and floating down the river Sully, that this is maybe you're new on the show. Just a quick little intro. And to be fair, our bosses at Locked On have encouraged to include a tiny little bit in case someone doesn't know who the heck we are.
Right.
Evidently, one of our listeners took umbrage with that. And Rick Knopf says, Sully, not many really good commentators open their show with all their accomplishments. That's Bush. Buddy. You think that's all my accomplishments? Really? You think that's all of my accomplishments? I have accomplished so much. I had to whittle it down. I had to make it. I just hit the points that are, that basically, that's relevant for this podcast. But please, let's just be clear for a second. All right. I've accomplished a lot, but one of the things, and I was humble enough not to mention this. You can look it up. Time Magazine, Person of the Year in 2006. I am the co-Person of the Year of Time Magazine in 2006. Did I mention that? No, not at all. So maybe just sort of let's pump the brakes on what's Bush. All right. I'm sorry you had the horror of that almost 7 seconds of your life for a quick bio there. Look it up. Time Magazine Co-Person of the Year 2006. That's me. So a little bit of humility was shown by me. Now let's get on to baseball here for a second. And before we jump mainly into the Cardinals, I want to talk a little bit about your division. We just talked about the AL Central, where the defending champion Minnesota Twins seem to be dismantling their pitching staff. And there's no clear-cut leader, which is why I kind of like what the Royals are doing, which is like, heck, why don't we just improve ourselves? If it works, great. If it doesn't, it's not like we're signing long-term deals here. The Central is weird. We went into last year, and I said it looked like the only team that was trying with the Cardinals, and that turned out to be incorrect. And Milwaukee basically ran away with it. The Cubs finished a mosquito's whisker away from Arizona, and then went on to see that team go play in the World Series. It's a strange division, and other than St. Louis, you see you saw a council move from Milwaukee to the Brewers, but I've spent more on the upkeep of the background of my Locked On MLB studio here than the Cubs have spent on free agency, and I think that's actually accurate at this point. So, JD, of the teams other than the Cardinals, what's going on? Are people trying? Is everyone rebuilding? What is happening to your rivals? Before we hit the Cardinals, what's happening to your rivals there?
Well, I can only assume. Obviously, I'm not in there with any of the Cubs guys or the Reds guys or anything, but I'm assuming that they're all kind of waiting on the trickle down effect. First, you had Ohtani that people were waiting on. And then now you've got Yamamoto that people are waiting on. And then I would expect a little bit of movement, especially from the Chicago Cubs. The Reds have made a couple of moves here and there. Nothing like major, because there's been rumors that they want to deal Jonathan India and they want to bring in an elite pitcher, a guy like a Dylan Cease that they might make a trade for. They obviously have the prospects to do that with. Could India be a part of a deal for something like that? I don't know, because outside of the division, I know as a Cardinals fan going up against India, he beats our brains in. But how other people perceive him outside of that is that not a very good defensive second baseman at all. Plays in a tiny little ballpark in Cincinnati. Is he even really that good? So I don't know exactly what his worth is to any of the other teams out there. The Pirates are still kind of the Pirates. They're not going to ever do anything major. They're not going to make any major moves. They got McCutchen back, which is great. He belongs in Pittsburgh, but I mean, obviously that's not a move.
Why not sign Dave Parker while you're at it? Why not sign Andy Van Slyke? I mean, do you know what? It's funny. I don't mean to cut you off there, but I've said that a team owes their fan base either a present, a future, or a past. The present is what you really owe them, which is a summer. Give me a good summer. If you don't have a good summer, say, well, we got a plan in the future. We're building to something. Just bang with us. And the worst case scenario is, here's a player you like. You want to cheer him? And that's kind of what they're doing there.
Yeah.
The Pirates have a lot of talent. It just, I haven't, and they looked, for the first third of the season last year, they were pretty good. But then, the backs of the baseball cards don't lie, and the team fell apart.
Yeah, and it's tough. I feel bad because it seems like right when they're the guys that they've grown, that they're the ones who have built up and have produced, as soon as they're ready to take off, they're ready to actually move on to another city is what ends up happening. And it's just this constant cycle where, you feel bad for cities that go through that each and every year. Milwaukee on the other side, they tore it down. I don't know how long Burns is going to be around in Milwaukee, whether he's going to be worth more in a trade deadline deal this year than he would be right now during the offseason. So we're all kind of waiting on that. The Brandon Woodruff release was kind of that was one that caught a lot of us off guard because of the injury, and they were just ready to cut ties. So I don't know, man. It seems like the Reds are the only one that have made any moves and seem to have the brightest future right now as far as youth and guys that looked really good last year. Can they repeat it? Is the pitching staff, even though it was hurt a lot last year, are they going to be able to pull off the stuff that they did last year? I don't know. I think it's still kind of a question mark. And then you got the Cardinals, who I think pretty much everybody picked to win the division last year and had one of their worst seasons in franchise history.
Yeah.
And they had to rebuild an entire starting rotation and are working on bullpen stuff. And everybody's kind of wondering, are these guys even good? People are questioning whether or not guys like Arenado and Goldie still have what it takes to put them into the playoffs.
Before we jump into the Cardinals, I do want to say that Bellinger is floating out there. And I've said here, someone's going to sign him to a long-term deal and will regret it.
Yeah.
If there's any player out there who just strikes me as, do you know what? I think they've had their peak. I know he had a good year last year with Chicago, and the change of scenery was the right move for him because he was dreadful in 2021 and 2022. But I'm always wary. I'm wary of the huge uptick on a contract year. They're like that. I mean, I've been wrong before, and if I'm wrong, and I like Bellinger, I do like Bellinger as a player, and to him, I would go running back to the Cubs because apparently, Wrigley Field seems to be a great place for him. But I think that's, man, some team's going to wind up in 3 or 4 years regretting that deal. Well, look at. Hey, my folks in Australia, I said, look it, do a shot. Everyone has to do a shot every time I say look it. And I have lots of great fans like Jay Cottrell, who of course said this dude is a no talent hack. So I got my everyday Sullys and I got my Jay Cottrells. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about the Cardinals and what are they? Would you put your money on the Cardinals? Would you push all the chips to the center of the table for the Cardinals? I don't know, but maybe if you do, you should use FanDuel. Now look at, there you go. Another one for you. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, and I know you have, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off or wrap up the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the National Football League. Hey, here's a quick reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts like JD of Locked On, plus our national shows like me covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, JD, I picked the Cardinals. I thought the Cardinals looked great going into last year. Spoiler alert, they weren't. And you and I have talked about this. You and I have covered. We've done the autopsy for the 2023 St. Louis Cardinals. Just things didn't click. They didn't get some of the, they didn't get the performances they were expecting from, the Michaelises and the Wainwrights, and they wound up being sellers. They wound up trading away Montgomery. They wound up trading away some of their top players. And while Goldschmidt was okay and Arenado was okay, they certainly weren't MVPs. So, and they wound up trading away their O'Neill to the Red Sox. So, all right, talk to me about what they've been doing this offseason. What has there been any movement or anything that has excited you as a big Cardinals guy?
Well, it's hard not to be excited about Sonny Gray, who has been very, very successful over the last couple of years. He was a very Cardinal type of guy. Like when we headed into the offseason and you kind of pick and choose of like, who would be a good fit for the St. Louis Cardinals? Sonny Gray was always at the top of the list. 34 years old. Was it going to cost you one of these 7-year deals, which the Cardinals are deathly afraid of? Apparently, they just will not go towards that type of contract. That is not something that interests them. A guy that was from the Midwest area, lives in Nashville, so he wanted to be closer to home. It just made a lot of sense. Now, when the Braves started peeking their heads into things and you start hearing them talking about Sonny Gray and how they would like to get their hands on him, I got a little nervous, because if you had to choose, would you go with 91 loss St. Louis, or do you go down to the Atlanta Braves, one of the best teams in baseball, on one of the best pitching staffs in baseball already? So I was a little bit shocked when it ended up being where he landed. I was a little bit surprised by that. But apparently this is where he wanted to be. He wanted to be a St. Louis Cardinal, and that was something that they took advantage of. His introduction press conference was one of the more unique ones I've ever seen, because he first off, he carries a baseball with him at all times. Didn't know that was something that he did. But he talked about culture. He talked about changing the mindset of how things were done in St. Louis. He thought that guys like Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, who were the other signings that they had for their rotation, like how, as far as attitude and the way they carry themselves in a clubhouse and on the roster, that was going to be just as important as to what they do on the field, which got me thinking more and more about, last year, as bad as it was, we saw the on-field stuff. Were they really a 91 loss team? Because you remember, they're basically a AAA team after August. Right. They weren't, it wasn't like they were fielding anybody all that great. But things had soured really badly in the clubhouse. You had some guys that clearly weren't a fit. They just didn't mesh well together. And
who would be an example of that?
The guys nobody ever specifically named people, but Ollie Marble, their manager, at the end of the season, made a point to say that we need to weed out some of the people in here that aren't on the same page as what the Cardinals are trying to accomplish. And you saw them move on from guys like a Jack Flaherty, who people sometimes accused of not having the best attitude. Tyler O'Neill is a guy that they think, after that initial series against the Braves where he wasn't hustling around third base, Ollie calls him out to the press about, that's not how we play ball here, blah, blah, blah. Whether or not you agree with him doing that or not, because I was somebody who was like, that kind of feels like it should have been handled in the clubhouse. But that was something that was called out, and they wondered if Tyler O'Neill was somebody that maybe didn't have the best attitude. It wasn't so much about the team anymore, but was trying to just kind of take care of himself these days. But again, they never said exactly who these people were. Genesis Cabrera was a guy that they DFA'd, ended up in Toronto, pitched very well for them after he left St. Louis. But he was a guy that clearly did not click well with what was going on in St. Louis. So just a few names that possibly could be the guys they're talking about there. Again, they never specifically said, but you kind of see how they treated certain people and what they did with their moves. And you just you can guesstimate who these guys might have been. Jordan Montgomery was not an issue. Jordan Montgomery was great. Yeah. I was definitely shocked that there wasn't some sort of extension talk done in spring training after they had already signed up Miles Michaelis again to an extension. I thought that was going to be their next move. Didn't happen. I believe he's a Boris client anyway, so that he doesn't usually like his clients to sign early. He usually wants them to become a free agent, but that didn't happen. They ended up having to trade him away, and now look at him. He's one of the most sought after arms in Major League Baseball right now. And you would think that the Cardinals made a mistake there. They were looking for pitching. They had a guy who clearly was somebody who was pretty good, pitched well in St. Louis, was amazing with the Rangers in the postseason, and they let him slip through their fingers. So they had to go out and get some other guys. Excited about Gray. The Lance Lynn and the Kyle Gibson signings, you look at some of their stats, and you're like, oh my gosh, a lot of hits, a lot of home runs, a lot of runs in general. But I think what the idea behind this is that they wanted guys that they could trust to be out there and answer the bell every fifth day. And that is one thing that all three of them have going for them, is they are what we call innings eaters, and they haven't dealt with a lot of injuries recently. and have been guys that they can trust. Because I even got a stat for you, Sully. You're going to like this. I did some homework for you. 6+ innings over the last 3 seasons. If the Cardinals get 6+ innings out of a starter, their record is 122-62.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
A 663 winning percentage. Last year, as bad as the team was, 35-25 when they have a pitcher go 6+ innings. If they drop fewer than that, their record is 132-170. So they believe, at least this is what I'm thinking, they get the guys that they can trust to be out there to get you the 6 innings. That will leave their bullpen not being as taxed as it was so early on last year when you had Adam Wainwright going 3 innings, or you had, you had Steven Matz, who constantly gets hurt, which they're going to try him again this year. But another guy that, he can't answer the bell every day, where they were trusting rookies to come up. Jack Flaherty was throwing, 3 and 4 innings and throwing 120 pitches in those starts, and it was a mess from the get-go, and they just never could climb out of that hole. As soon as something started to look like it was getting better, something else would happen. Another injury to another player, whether it was Lars Nootbaar or Wilson Contreras is being talked about getting moved to left field. Like, just weird stuff was happening last year. Very non-Cardinal stuff, the stuff that we're used to. We're not the drama team. We're the boring team that just shows up and does their job. And all of a sudden we have 90-something wins at the end of the season. And everybody's like, yeah, there they are again. And it was just completely opposite last year. And it was just a weird season. And they had a horrible bullpen on top of it.
Yeah, and of course, what comes first? I'd always, the innings of the bullpen, and it'll never cease to amaze me. I saw it in the postseason as well. When you're yanking these pitchers, after 78 pitches and 5 1/3 innings, and you wonder, where's our bullpen gassed? Well, because you didn't, that's why I was so happy when Bochy would push some of his pitchers, like, yeah, give me another inning. Give me you're facing the bottom of the lineup. Give me another inning.
And those are the kind of guys that the Cardinals were targeting, because as bad as, again, the numbers were for maybe Gibson and Lynn last year with what they gave up. One of the reasons why they gave up so many hits and stuff, because they were out there every game. They were getting 30-something starts last year, and they're hoping they'll improve. I mean, Gibson, 15-win pitcher for a very good Baltimore Orioles team last year. They seemed fine with him in their rotation. Why would the Cardinals expect to be better than that? Should they have gone for somebody, a little more, I don't know, elite of a pitcher than those guys? There's an argument to be had there, but it was something they obviously targeted. They wanted Gray, they wanted Lynn, they wanted Gibson, and those guys wanted to play in St. Louis. That was something that their president of baseball operations, John Mozeliak, brought up a lot, was that these were guys that wanted to be in St. Louis. So it made a lot of sense to bring them in.
Mozeliak will be discussed when we come back.
Ooh.
Once again, a reminder that Locked On Sports has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. We're here with JD Hafron, who, JD, you gave me the transition I was waiting for, and you didn't even know it. Mozeliak, right? All right. Is he on the hot seat? As we've now gone 10 years without a Cardinal pennant. We've had some colossally disastrous moves, including Alcantara, including Gallen, including Adolis Garcia, who I'm going to go out on a limb. All of them could be pretty helpful in a Cardinal uniform right now.
And you didn't even mention a Rosarena yet. Thank you.
Yeah, a Randy Rosarena would look pretty good in a Cardinal uniform. I knew there was one I was forgetting off the top of my head. And then he spent the sun, the moon, the stars to bring in Arenado and bring in Goldschmidt. He tries to replace Yadier Molina with Contreras, and there's talk about putting him in the outfield. This is a team that went from, you could write in ink 90 wins to, again, they haven't been in the World Series since 2013. They've gone to the League Championship Series a few times, but have been smacked out of it. I think they've won one League Championship Series game since the 2013 pennant.
Mhm.
Division titles and wild card appearances are not going to cut it in St. Louis. And he's been at the driver's seat for a little bit, and it's cost a lot of terrific players. And last year they're a 90-loss team. Is he on the hot seat?
I would say sort of. And the reason I say that is because he's only signed through 2025. Their owner loves him. Obviously they've had a relationship for how many years now? It's been a really long time that he's been with the Cardinals, and as president of baseball operations, as the GM before that. So barring another 90-loss type of just horrible season, I cannot see them getting rid of John Mozeliak. Ollie Marmol in his last year of his contract as a manager, again, if things go sideways like it did last year again, I could see them cutting him loose beforehand. But I feel like both of them are going to get a chance to finish out their contracts. I think that's kind of the plan right now. Should he be on the hot seat? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like when you hear that, when you hear the failures in the playoffs, and now we're failing to get to the playoffs, and yet you have a fan base that churns out 3 million plus every year for your home crowd, and they don't get the results they're expecting, and it's the same stuff every year. And you mentioned all of those deals that have gone wrong over the last 5-6 seasons, where they took chances on things and none of them have really panned out. A normal GM, I can understand why he would be on the hot seat, but it's weird because again, 2025 is when his contract's up, and I think he rides off into the sunset, and he's hoping to do that with at least a winning record under his belt, hopefully a World Series championship. But looking at the roster, looking at what they have in the minor leagues right now, it's hard to say that they're on a trajectory to do that unless they make some major moves. It feels like, once again, it's just another one of those Cardinal teams that is just like, oh, ho hum, and then they'll be hovering a little bit over 500 by the time they get to the deadline, and they'll make a couple moves to try to get into the playoffs. But it never feels like that I want to win a championship type of attitude each year. It's like, let's get in and see what happens type of vibes, instead of like grabbing, the bull by the horns type of thing. And like, you know what? This is the year that we go for it. And we're going to sign somebody like a Blake Snell, just throwing a name out there, but somebody like that would make a major, major impact to go along with your type of guys, like a Sonny Gray and like a Lance Lynn. But that has not happened. It doesn't appear that that's going to happen anytime soon either.
He's like Brian Cashman of the Midwest at this point, where you just where it's like, the expectations are high, and for the last, it's amazing, for the last 10 seasons that we've, going into 2024, you could say the last 10 seasons have included 0 Yankee and 0 Cardinal pennants. That's just weird.
Yes.
That's just very strange. So we'll see, because like the American League Central, it is an extraordinarily confusing and winnable division. So we will see what happens there, JD Hafron.
Now, I do have a question for you, Sully, because
we got to wrap up here. But yes, fire away.
What is a move that you think the Cardinals should or should have made this offseason outside of what they've done already that you think would have
cease?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you if you bring in Gray, and you say Gibson and Lynn can be you look at them as your 4 and 5 innings eaters at the end, but you have Gray and Cease at the top of that rotation. That solves a bunch of your bullpen issues, because you're not wearing out the bullpen. To me, he's an ideal, and whatever prospects you're going to trade for him, it's a winnable division right now. I wouldn't touch the offense right now. There's always someone coming up who's going to do something. And by getting O'Neill out, you're going to give one of their other younger outfielders a chance to get some more playing time in there. I'm fine. I'm wary of spending big money on a reliever, so I wouldn't touch Hader either right now. Right. I think you make the bullpen better by making the rotation better. You don't wear out the GD bullpen, because you had guys, as you said, the starting pitching couldn't get through the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have guys who can go 5, 6, or pitch into the 7th, then you have a better bullpen there. And I think Dylan Cease, of all the pitchers who are out there, Corbin Burns is another one. I just don't see that happening.
Right.
But
And
I
that's
think
really
Cease is realistic.
Yeah. And then one final thought is that's the frustrating part about covering this team and being a part of this city is that it seems like they are that one pitcher away, right? There are a
Yeah.
few of those type of pitchers out there that he could bring in, yet they
Mhm.
don't seem like they're going to do it. Why? It's
And
weird.
and it's not saying Snell. It's not saying Yamamoto, or me saying another name from Korea or from Japan either. It's just a person who, as we know, is a serviceable, solid major league pitcher who you can put in the rotation, and you build your rotation that way. That would be my answer.
And Cease would only cost you prospects because you don't have to
Exactly.
pay him yet.
And you
So
can win a division this year and roll the dice. You win a pennant. Well, look, before we skedaddle, it's time for me to ask the trivia question. In that fateful Game 6 of the '85 World Series, aka the Don Denkinger game, the Cardinals took the lead going to the 9th. Here is the trivia question: who drove in the run that gave the Cardinals the lead in the Don Denkinger game? This would have been, if they had gotten the 3 outs, he would have been a Cardinal legend to drive in the World Series winning run. Instead, he is an obscure trivia question. Put the answers down here in the comments at YouTube or Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Reminding you that I was the 2006 Time Magazine Co-Person of the Year while trying to make sense of the St. Louis Cardinals and that weird Central Division. This has been a Locked On MLB, Locked On Cardinals crossover. He's JD Hafron. I'm your pal Sully. This has been Locked On MLB. And please call me Sully. I did the ending a little differently. So sue me.